and your pack feels like it's 10 times heavier. So we had to make sure that we had been drinking enough water. We had to make sure that we were eating enough food to fuel our body, right? In a spiritual sense, that living water, the food of the bread of life, who's Jesus himself, the word, we had to be fueled up to get our strength going. But even though, okay, I think we can go a little further, some of it was up, some of it was down. And down, although it's much easier than up, it still takes energy. Because when you're going down, that's when that gravel gets slippery. That's when you don't want to go too fast or you'll fall, right? Falls happen when you're going downhill. Here's Mark climbing up to the top of the pass. Whew, it was not always easy. But the strength that you gain from going uphill is the strength that you use coming back down. So we got into this rhythm of eating in the morning. I'd have my cup of coffee. Mark is not a coffee fan. He'd have hot cocoa, and we'd start walking. And you can go a little further. Let's just let it run a little bit. This is a downhill. This is a gentle downhill. But you can see how the road is kind of gravelly. The path is not always, it's not a sidewalk. So you have to watch where you put your feet almost every step. But it was so beautiful. It just keeps you going. So we would stop. There, we can pause here. We would stop. That's where we had our first breakfast. And we would refill our water when we needed to. Take our break. We got to make sure we're drinking. And then we'd have dinner at our campsite. And, when you bring everything with you, what we had was these dehydrated meals. And so we'd boil water, and we'd put it in there. We'd let it sit. And I tell you, we had the best biscuits and gravy I think I've ever had in my life. And it might have helped that we would have been walking for 10 miles and we were really hungry, but it was amazing. So that picture on the top there is Mark filling up our water filter system. The beautiful thing about this hike is there's almost always a stream nearby, so we would dip out this cold ice melt mountain water and run it through our filter and fill up our water bottles. And it was so refreshing. But it was also life and death. So if you don't have that water, you won't take another step. Let's see. So let's look at the spiritual ramifications here, right? The ups and downs of life affect how we feel, don't they? And it can be a big season of up, or it can just be little ups during the day. But you feel it. And I think in my spiritual walk, I was always really kind of afraid when, I'm facing a trial. And I would be a little bit fearful about how my energy would shrink back. But this hike taught me that I don't have to fear that. That's normal. You're going to feel it when you start facing trials. But again, we fall back to those basics. I've got the living water of Jesus. I've got the bread of life. I've got his presence with me to carry me through these difficulties. And so if you're feeling, I don't know where you are right now, if you're feeling like you're heading uphill and your legs are heavy and your pack is heavy, stop and see what maybe are you missing. Maybe you need prayer. Maybe you need assurance from God's word. Maybe you need fellowship. Maybe you need encouragement for those people around you. Psalm 138:3 says, "As soon as I pray, you answer me. You encourage me by giving me strength." And that's what we need, isn't it? Acts 14:21 and 22 says, "After preaching the good news in Derbe and making disciples, Paul and Barnabas returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, where they strengthened the believers. They encouraged them to continue in the faith, reminding them that we must suffer many hardships to enter the kingdom of God." Right? Don't be surprised. Jesus promised us trouble. But we have his presence to get us through it. It's not insurmountable. We can keep going one step in front of the other. All right, so next, a little bit of this slide. So we managed our energy and our strength. We also had to be sure to rest. Because for Mark and I, we just couldn't walk the whole way. We had to stop. Now, we saw some people, they're ultralight runners. and they had a pack that was really like a sack of flour on their back. And they did the whole thing in one day. That's not me. That's not me. And I think we see those people in our spiritual life that they're just like zooming on, and we're like, how do they do that? But again, we got to walk our own walk. And so for Mark and I, we needed that time to pause and rest. All right, this is me walking in the morning. You can't hear Mark's voice, but this is one of those early mornings. We started out, it was about 55 degrees here. And I tell you, the hardest thing, okay, you can pause it there. The hardest thing was just starting again every morning because you're a little bit sore. You've been laying on the ground. I'm not that young anymore. And so laying on the ground, you feel it. But you know, as soon as you would start walking, you'd loosen up. And I think that's the same in our spiritual walk. We can feel like, oh, I have to start again. I have to start again. But that's okay. That's what pilgrims do. We just walk. We just get up and we start walking. So as we learn to take those rests, and we would take short rests where we would just find a shady spot and we'd drink more water and we would just be still let our heart rate come down a little bit, take a few breaths, and then we'd be on again. But we also had breaks we called pack breaks. And that's where we would actually find shade and take our packs off and sit down, drink more water, maybe refill our water if we needed to, and take those snacks, get more fuel. And those are so important along the way, and they're so important for us in our spiritual sense too, that we really need to rest. God promises us rest, right? He told us to take that Sabbath rest. We don't have to be in a hurry in our spiritual walk. We can take our time. And the thing about taking a rest is that's actually when we actually got to look around. Because when you're hiking, you're kind of looking where your feet are going, and you're looking down. And I think we can get that way in our spiritual walk too, where we're just looking where we're going, and we're not really looking around. And so when we would sit, we could take in the beauty that was all around us. And I think we need to do that spiritually throughout the day. You know, maybe at the end of the day, we take a bigger break for sure. In the morning, we start with that. But even throughout the day, to stop and just say, Lord, you have given me a beautiful life because you are with me. Yeah, I'm struggling uphill right now, or, ooh, that was a big downhill we just came through. But your presence is so beautiful. I want to stop and acknowledge that. At the end of the day, I think we can go a little further. That was our first campsite. We had a place where Mark could make a fire. He was so happy. You know, he's a fire bug. So we had 2 campsites where he could make a fire. So the first one and the last one. Oh, so this is us taking a break in the shade. This is a pack break because we took the packs off. We had just come through a really sunny and dry place. There wasn't much shade. So as soon as we saw the shade, we sat down. And look for those places of shade in your spiritual walk. That's probably when you meet together with other believers for encouragement. Keep going. All right, and this one was taken from a pack break too, where I was able to take my good pictures, I think, from the pack break. So yeah, go on one. Here's us. Go ahead and let this run. This is a speed shot of us setting up our tent. So we had to go through this every night. We'd look for a campsite that was kind of smooth, had a place where there was no rocks, and we'd set up camp and really, really rest for the night. And it was a really great rhythm to be in. So make sure that, I would call this in a spiritual life, these were our Sabbath rests, where we would really just set up. Okay, you can pause right there. God has given us a commandment to rest. Rest can mean Sabbath, or it can mean ultimate rest with him. Hebrews 4:10 and 11 says, "For all who have entered into God's rest have rested from their labors, just as God did after creating the world. So let us do our best to enter that rest. But if we obey God as the people of Israel did, if we disobey God as the people of Israel did, we will fall." And so there's a warning, right? We've got to rest because we need it physically. We also need it spiritually. The last night that we were camping, I did not sleep well. I'll go into that a little bit more. But the next day I was tired and I did fall. I slipped on that gravel coming down, and it's almost all healed, but I had a big old scraped knee that I hadn't had for like years. But We don't want to fall. We want to rest. We want to hike rested as best that we can. All right, so the next thing we had to be aware of is obstacles. And this is the last thing that I'm going to go through is there's obstacles on this trail, just like there's obstacles in our spiritual life. There was the physical things. So we had water crossings we had to get across. And not all water crossings were created equal. So if we could go to the next. Here's one of the easier water crossings. We had a nice suspension bridge. But on this bridge, it says only one allowed at a time because it was really shaky. And you had to kind of walk with your feet in a line like you were walking on a tightrope. Otherwise, the thing would just start rocking and rolling. That was where the bridge was shaky. Now, this kind of crossing, you can let this one play too. This is where I was shaking because I'm crossing on a little tiny log. And I've got my poles that help me, my rod and my staff, they comfort me. To get across, because that pack on your back just makes you feel all different. And so I made it. And so Mark filmed me. He filmed me on this one. We can go ahead and pause this one. One that didn't get filmed was the one where I got stuck in the middle. I'm standing on this log, and I didn't know where to put my next foot, and I froze. Thankfully, Mark was behind me that time, and it was a wide enough log jam that he was able